Welcome to Learning Life Skills Together. This is our weekly community Zoom meeting where our guests help us to go deeper into the 4 life skills and open up a huge array of chances to practice them. Hello, everyone, and welcome to meeting number 10. Wow. We have made it to that mark, and I think we've had some really amazing conversations, really helpful conversations, and we are about to have another one about sharing the life skills with kids with different abilities. So as we have done 10 times now, we're going to start with an attention practice, since we're focused right now on the skill of attention. And so we've done this practice before. It's called the soles of the feet. And I wanted to do it this time because the soles of the feet was actually developed by a friend of mine named Nirb Singh, whose entire career has been spent working on these kinds of life skills with children with different abilities. And so this one was developed specifically for one child. It was a young man who had great difficulty in regulating his anger. And so people came to Nirb and asked him if he would figure out a way to work with this young man and maybe reduce the sort of incidence of anger that he was having in his community living. And so this is the practice that Nirb developed and taught to this young man. And once he knew how to do it, they would run scenarios of the things that were difficult for him to not go into anger around. And he would do this practice and give himself a reset. And really, it sorted the whole situation out. So just this one practice of paying attention to how it is around you and how it is within you. So let's just start by paying attention to what it's like for you right now. Just where you are. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What's the temperature in the room? What are you noticing? And then maybe you could start to notice inside what's going on. So what does it feel like in your body right now? So just noticing maybe your muscles have tension in some places and maybe they're soft in other places. Sort of scanning through. Maybe you notice how you're breathing right now. Is it slow and deep? Is it fast and shallow? Somewhere in between? What do you find as you check in? And then you could check into your mind. So the place where thoughts happen. And just noticing what the thoughts are like. Not so much what they are, but are there a lot of them? Are they moving fast? Is it the same one over and over? Just aware of what's going on. So we're not changing anything. We're just really checking in. And you could check in to see if there's an emotion that's here right now. And so a lot of our emotions have been given names. And so maybe you notice that the emotion you have has a name, and you could say that silently to yourself. And then you could bring as much of your attention as you can muster down to the soles of your feet. Just feeling the soles of your feet, maybe against the floor, maybe against the insoles of your shoes. Maybe your feet are just hanging over the edge of the chair and there's air and so feeling air. Just being aware of the soles of your feet, feeling the heels, feeling the instep, feeling the balls of the feet, feeling the toes, and maybe you even wiggle your toes a little bit to feel the different toes, the individual toes. And then feeling the entire soles of your feet again. And from there, maybe just moving back up through your body and noticing how your body's feeling right now. Places of tightness in the muscles, places where the muscles are soft. So maybe you notice your breathing and what it's like. Just checking in. And checking in on your mind. What's on your mind now? What's the thinking like in that place where thinking happens? Busy? Busier? Less busy? And maybe noticing emotion. Do you come up with the same name or a different one? Just saying that to yourself. And so now you have checked in. You know what's going on with you. And so you can just go right on with your life. So this is the kind of practice that we really encourage, this idea of just checking in for 3 seconds or for like a minute or so as we did. And maybe you notice something about how you are now. Maybe it's the same, maybe it's different than before. So if you have a chance, you could type us something in the chat, letting us know what's up with you. And meanwhile, I'm going to ask our guest tonight, Sandy Shacklady-White, how she is in this moment with us.
Well, thanks, Dawn. I'm feeling much calmer now that I did my check-in. And I have to say that I do check-ins throughout the day, and it's a good strategy to help kind of ground myself and realize if I'm feeling tense in any part of the body or the whole body, depending on what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's very helpful to balance myself out.
Yeah, great. So Sandy is an educational consultant for the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. And so her job and her career has really involved kids with different abilities. So, Sandy, can you talk to us a little bit about what your job is and sort of, I know you have passion around it because you've been doing this a long time and you've been doing it at a very high level. So let us know.
Sure. Yeah. I, as Don said, a educational consultant with what we call PaTTAN, or some places call it PaTTAN. We are the working division of the Bureau of Special Education in the Department of Education of Pennsylvania. So I've been here, I guess, really 6.5 years. And prior to that, I was a special ed teacher for 18 years and a special ed administrator for 12. And so I've been in the field for over 34 years now. And my passion is with helping youth with different abilities or diverse abilities, because they are people too. And I think we're becoming more and more aware of people who are labeled with disabilities as really being more than just a disability, that they are whole people with many strengths and interests and preferences, and trying to gain a sense of belonging and togetherness as part of our community. So this goes way back to my own childhood with my dad who's now 96, but he has a physical disability, and I didn't even realize he had a physical disability until my friends told me, "What's wrong with your dad?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what's wrong with dad? There's nothing wrong with dad. That's dad." So I've kind of carried that with me because
Mm.
it wasn't until I was maybe in second grade or so when some friends came to my house and pointed it out to me that dad looked different than their dad. And that really grew a passion in my life, as well as having a brother with some emotional and learning differences that back in the 70s weren't as addressed as they are today. So that's carried through for me and led me into the field.
Yeah, yeah. So the work that's happening in the schools has become more and more sophisticated, I think,
Hmm.
over as you say, in the 70s, not so much, and now,
Right.
we're in a different place, and you look at the color of my hair and you can see that you could go way back, and I too have a passion around this particular subject. I'm a sibling in between two other siblings who have intellectual disabilities at at different levels, and it's the one thing I want to say is that it's one of the reasons that I am interested in these four skills is because I needed them in my own family and in my negotiating in the world. As you said, people will point things out to you when you're a kid, and that's not always it's not always comfortable and it's not always
Mm-mm.
kind. And my parents struggled greatly in negotiating the systems with my two sisters, and I watched that. And there wasn't a lot that I could do, and I didn't know the things that I know now, or that
Right.
we as a society know now.
Right.
So I greatly wish that they had, the four basic skills that we're teaching in learning life skills together, and that they and I had those to share. So that's kind of my ownership, my piece of this. And so that really the parents and carers are kind of the common denominator here, because I
Mhm.
suspect that the parents are a really important part of what it is that you do in a way.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because even at my current job at Patton, we do have a group of us who were part of the Family Engagement Network or initiative. We call the things that we work on at Patton as initiatives. And we do have a Family Engagement Initiative. You can check out the Patton website and see what's going on there. But so at all levels, we're always looking at where does the family, how can we connect with the family? How can we collaborate? Because
Yes.
even back in the 70s, when special ed became law, the parents were just kind of invited in and they really weren't heard and
Yeah.
empowered. And that has so changed over the last 20 years or so. And more so, it's become more of an engagement with families and the carers so that we're providing all the supports that our youth with different abilities need.
Yeah. And so this, I think, is where we come together, your work and the work of learning life skills together, which has, I think, something to offer to parents and carers, um, directly for them and for the kids,
Mm-hmm.
as the parents sort of take these skills on and polish them up for themselves. So it's kind of just that part is a big potential help in families.
Mm-hmm.
Just the parents doing those check-ins that we're talking about.
I have to totally agree with that. That sometimes when I was a teacher as an administrator and sitting in meetings with parents, or caregivers. It just mentioning, well, how are you showing your emotions to your child, and how is that going? Because the kids feel it, and people often think that kids with different abilities, specifically significant cognitive disabilities, oh, they don't know. It's like, well, they do know, they feel it. And if you as a parent are angry around them, and they aren't going to understand that. So being able to check in with ourselves as adults is going to be a great way to be role models for our youngsters.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing, is that sense of, if we can work with our own emotions, that's in a way contagious. I mean, that's one way
Yeah,
of talking about it. Or, we could be, I guess, a little more technical and say that we co-regulate our
yeah,
children. When we've got it together, there's a much better chance that our child can keep it together. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and just that presence of somebody who's the adult with the child, just that presence of being calm, and the whole demeanor without even saying anything can make a huge difference in that co-regulating with the child.
Yeah, yeah. So just you see something going on, you take that deep breath, you do that little check in, and then you're available. You're ready to help the child.
And being consistent with that
Yeah.
practice of that
Mm.
deep breath, or whatever your go-to strategy is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Consistency. Practice is kind
Hmm.
of what we've been calling it in
Hmm.
our talk, that we need to practice these things again and again until they are, just ingrained in us, so that we do them. And that's what I mean by polishing up the skills. We all know
Hmm.
how to do this. We can all get ourselves in hand when we
That's
need
true.
when we need to. But to have some really good, solid strategies that we've practiced, that we know, that we rely on, this is the kind of thing that we're after.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So so this idea then of being together, which sort of ends the name here,
Yes.
where we learn the life skills together and we do things together, seems to me to be really important. And I'm just wondering how the together looks in some diverse ways. How
Sure.
could you talk
Yeah.
about that for us?
Absolutely. And I think these are a lot of good strategies for all our youth, whether they have different abilities or
Oh
not,
yeah,
but
yeah.
giving that think aloud kind of strategy where, as the carer, it's like, I'm noticing I'm feeling anxious. I'm noticing my fingers are clenched, or I'm feeling extra warm, and just thinking that all out loud with the child who's with you, and asking them then, how are you feeling? And as you were saying earlier about that checking in with, what are you noticing on the outside and the inside? And what are those cues of our body that are saying that maybe there's something not quite feeling right? And then try to name it. Am I feeling sad or anxious, or whatever the
Mm.
feeling may be? And letting the child, the youngster, talk through that with you, with them, and just having that discussion without any judgment or anything placed on the child, but just having a conversation in which the child is feeling safe and reassured and validated that it's okay to feel that way. And then if there's a problem, a problem with with behavior and how they respond to what's going on, and then talking through with them more, and providing that consistency, that sense of safety. Other strategies can be using visuals. You
Mm.
can have feeling charts that are, and you can find them online in a lot of places for free, or a nominal fee. Um, like a feelings faces chart that says, I feel happy, sad, and they have corresponding faces. You could use those with your kiddos who are a little less verbal, um, have not developed a vocabulary quite yet. So you can
Mm.
start with little ones. You could use drawings, that you draw together, and showing them what it looks like,
Mm.
photographs that
Yeah.
you may have of family, and oh, that's Aunt Susie. She's happy. She looks happy here. I can tell this by. And looking at things like that and talking it out loud with the youth.
Yeah.
I can be very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is so important to have a vocabulary around these things.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're modeling
Yeah.
that vocabulary at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah. I mean, whether it's a visual vocabulary, as you're
Hmm.
saying, yeah, or the words, which are again so important. I mean, the thing that we did in the practice that we started with of noticing what our emotion was and then naming it for ourselves.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
act of naming our emotion lets us step back from it just a little bit. And so we're not quite taken over by it the way we were before we named it.
Right.
It's a very, very interesting and useful thing to know about. Yeah, absolutely. So in this program, where we're working right now with this idea of paying attention, which we've really sort of suggested is a way of paying attention outside and inside, so it gets us to that checking in place. And the ways that we're suggesting people do it is ways that are also good for us. So, for example, we took walks. We went out, actually, a number of us walked along the Brandywine together. We checked in at the beginning, we checked in the middle, and we checked in at the end, just to see what being in that beautiful nature did for us. And maybe even what the effort of walking did for us. And so we're sort of playing that out now in these weekly meetings. We had Dr. Melissa Whidden from the kinesiology department at Westchester with us last week, talking about all of the things that just getting moving in the world does for us, physiologically and on the mental health side as well. And so next week we're going to have a fishing guide on talking about being in nature and really paying attention. This guy is really good. I mean, he can be spotting a fish and noticing the bird that's up above it, and tell you all about both of them. I mean, he's amazing. So just a quick advertisement for next week.
Yes.
But this is the kind of thing that we're trying to get people to do, to really get out and explore the world. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, was to talk about how exploring the world might look with kids with different or abilities.
Absolutely. And often it comes to mind when you're out in a trail or a park, and thinking about that accessibility for people with mobility concerns, that maybe there are students, kids who are using wheelchairs to get around, or special crutches or something along those lines. And there is a website for Pennsylvania to find accessible parks and trails. So you just Google Pennsylvania parks and trails for accessibility. You can find them. There's a bunch in the Chester County area. Because you want to do your homework before you go out with somebody who has trouble getting about physically, as well as taking a look at what those places might be. Say, if you have a child who is living with autism or obsessive compulsive disorder or even attention deficit disorder. You want to do your homework because you want to prepare the child in advance. You want to first, you want to make sure that it's going to be accessible to you, your child, maybe your whole family, and then sharing with them maybe pictures on the internet of the park or saying this is what we're going to do, and perhaps have some visuals that are of the park that the youth can be carrying with them so that you can reference them and say, oh, this is what we talked about. Here is the beginning of the trail. Here's the duck pond. Here are certain trees that we're going to see, or whatever might be at that park that could potentially cause a problem. By knowing your child, you would know, and being prepared in advance, and then having that kind of information during your visit to the trail or the park so that you can reference it back. So again, bringing them back to that sense of they're safe, they're reassured, so that they have a positive experience when they're on that excursion with you.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful ideas. And we will definitely get hold of that link to the site you're talking about and post that for folks right with this talk, as well as in our resources for the whole program.
Right.
Yeah. So let's see. So we've talked about some of these activities as well. We've talked about attention as looking at things together, just setting the time aside. Saying, all right, for the next 10 minutes, we're going to look at this picture book, or the next 10 minutes, we're going to look out the window at the birds. We also have coming up a great podcast, which we'll post soon, with someone who's written a book called Keep Looking Up, and the healing that comes from bird watching, and the boost to our mental health, to our mood, that comes just from being around birds. So these are the things that I'm thinking about, that I'm wondering how folks can engage them, and just anything that you might have run across, or anything that's happening in the schools around those kinds of things that might interest the parents and carers.
Sure. Yeah, there's using observation skills is always important, and knowing how to, again, talk out loud and be as concrete and specific as possible, like saying things, I am noticing out the window, I see the red bird, and just, what do you see? And eliciting that vocabulary from the child. We have to remember those who may have, who are blind or visually impaired. That can be a little bit more of a challenge. And then you want to be using more of this other senses, touch, if appropriate. If you're out on a walk, you could have children with visual impairments touching, as long as they're safe, the trees, the leaves, the ground, the rocks, whatever it may be. Having them focus on what they're hearing is another great strategy. Is like, oh, I hear a bird chirping. What do you hear? And maybe, a lot of kids know what crows sound like if you're out here in Chester County.
Yeah.
So I hear a crow. Do you hear a crow? And just taking that time to be quiet and listen, and then following up by saying, what I heard, what did you hear? And having that conversation going back and forth, using the other senses. Same with youth who are deaf or hard of hearing. They're not going to hear the birds, possibly. So you're going to draw more on the visuals, as well as pulling in the touch, and as well as smell, and whatever other senses are going on out in the environment around them, and having that discussion with them, or using visuals. Again, if the child's not verbal, you may have visuals that they use to communicate, making sure you're accessing those, and maybe even using drawings or journaling or coloring to allow them to express what they're experiencing in that moment.
Yeah, yeah. The whole together part. I mean, first
Mm-hmm.
the experience together in the quiet, and then the sort of talking about, or drawing about, or making up a song about. I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what it might be. How kids might choose to respond, but for us to respond, and as you say, to narrate our own
Mm-hmm.
experiences, so that some of that vocabulary maybe comes
Mm-hmm.
through, and how we look when we're using that vocabulary.
And that's so
Yeah,
important,
yeah,
really is. Yeah.
yeah. So we actually have in the program here, we have 4 skills that we're working with overall, and they run into each other. And the stronger you get at one, the easier the next one becomes. And so right now we're working on this skill of attention in and out. And the next skill is emotion regulation.
Mm.
And so you can sort of see from how we've been talking how emotion regulation is tied to attention, and how much, sort of, you might not think it, oh, let's go look at birds. How's that going to help my kid who's melting down? Well, it will. And I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
Sandy, I've talked about this a little bit, but maybe you could talk about that, how the attention skill ties in with the emotion skills.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's going back to being very salient, very open with the child about explaining what it's going to do for them. Right. Even when they're little, we're going to stop and pay attention to what we're seeing right now, or what we're hearing right now, and explain we're going to pay attention to what's going on right now. And maybe it's paying attention to ourselves and noticing how we're feeling, and then being able to realize, okay, well, maybe I feel tense, or I'm feeling an upset tummy. And what can we do to help that upset tummy? And by noticing that we're not feeling right in a spot, we're feeling really good, but not knowing how to express it, because little kids can be jumping all around and excited, but they may not realize that they're feeling excited or joy or happiness,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
pointing it out to them because sometimes there's time and place that's not going to be appropriate to be
Yeah, there's
jumping
that.
around,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's letting them realize that, and being very blunt about it with them, and very explicit. That's the word I'm looking for. Explicit with them as to how it all connects. Because it's going to, as the program says, it's life skills. These are skills they're going to need forever. And teaching as early as we possibly can, from when they're infants even, noticing what's going on with them, and just talking to them, even though they don't have a vocabulary yet, they do feel us. They do know how we're feeling. And if we're verbalizing to them that we're noticing that they're upset, they're angry, they're hungry, they're crying, whatever it may be, it starts to build that vocabulary early on, so that they'll be able to use that vocabulary, be able to name it and tame it, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the capacity to notice our emotions, which does, as you were saying, name it to tame it. Just that helps us. And then getting through the tough moments of our life, the moment that we don't want to be in, but we're in. That's really hard for adults. It's hard. It's hard for old folks. I'm sure it's incredibly hard when you're really small,
Mhm.
to be in a situation that is just plain uncomfortable and you don't know when it's going to
Yeah,
end.
because they usually don't know what it is. They
Yeah.
don't know. They just know they don't feel comfortable or they're not feeling calm, but they don't know why or what's going on. So it's equipping them with the vocabulary, whether it is through words or pictures or sign language or whatever it may be, and teaching them strategies like the breathing strategy from when they're little kids, littles, that breathing strategy or some of the other strategies that we learn through mindfulness types of activities, but also allowing fidget items, such as a squishy ball or, so they can focus on that to help self-regulate, to bring attention to themselves. And that may be an object that they need. Maybe it's a beloved stuffed animal that helps
Mm.
them self-regulate. And
Yeah.
you as a parent or a carer can help use that as a coping strategy. And then as they get older, you want to be working on things that are age appropriate. So we don't want a 21-year-old necessarily carrying around a big pink teddy bear, because we want things to be appropriate. So it might shift to something else that they find, maybe like a stress ball or anything like that, that is going to help with that, bring a sense of grounding to the moment
Mm.
and bring that attention to what's ever going on within them and around them before they respond to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so there's sort of the feeling of getting back into the feeling of your body with
Yeah.
a ball or with something that you're playing with, or as you say,
Hmm.
something nice and fuzzy. And not to downplay that the parent or carer is also that object for a long
Yeah.
time in the child's life, that
Hmm.
showing up, picking them up, holding them, rubbing their
Yeah.
back, doing all those kinds of things is not, a last ditch thing if it's narrated,
Hmm.
if I'm here, it's okay. Can you feel my,
Right.
that kind of thing is really, really deeply valuable in developing that skill of self-regulation.
Hmm.
We need to be co-regulated. I still need to be co-regulated sometimes,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I've
Yeah.
got to go home and say, hey, honey, listen to this, and
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
And touch is a big part of it,
yeah.
as you were just saying. Absolutely. Whether it's, the carer's touch or even learning a skill of holding the fuzzy teddy bear or a soft blanket or even using your pets at home.
Yeah.
They can help you regulate yourself and calm down, and or music. Music's another strategy that we can be teaching from the beginning of life
Yeah.
with our kiddos.
Yeah. From making our own music to
Yeah.
listening to something that's been recorded by
And even
someone.
if singing
Yeah.
along,
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that the more in touch we are with our bodies in these things, kind of the easier it is to regulate.
Yes.
So if we sing along, we're
Yeah.
feeling all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and letting go of that feeling as an adult that you're embarrassed by singing. It's your child. You want to be teaching them that, different strategies, because all of us are different and we all have different strategies for coping, and we want to make it healthy coping
Yeah.
strategies that they grow up with so that they don't go off on things that are not as healthy for their well-being as they become adults. And it's, dance and movement can also be extremely
Oh
helpful, especially
boy.
with kids.
Yeah.
um, as our brains don't really fully develop until we're into our 20s. So we need to be scaffolding or supporting our youth with learning these life skills that they're going to need, but as they're ready for them and as their brains are developing and maturing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So let's see. the final one of these skills is clear communication.
Mhm.
So this is partly what we've been building up to from the very beginning, right? With attention and with narrating our experience of the moment, right? So we're getting the words together and we're gaining self-knowledge. So it's really knowledge of ourself that lets us clearly communicate about what we need, which is really the kind of communication that we're talking about when we say clear communication. Yeah. For a child to say, "Daddy, I'm scared,"
that's huge.
Is an enormous step, rather than to just lie down and cry or whatever the response would be for that child. So all that we're trying to put together here sort of lead to that last skill in the list of 4, but they all just totally intertwine. You can't.
They totally do. Yeah.
You can't have one without the other. Really, you're practicing all of them in a sense when you're practicing one of them. And so that's sort of a look at the program. I'm wondering if you have any comments about that clear communication part from your perspective and your kind of unique place looking out over a great many differences.
Absolutely. One thing that I want to make sure people think about is behavior is communication. So if for any of us, I mean, if we think about behaviors of people, what is it that they're communicating? What is it that they need? Or what is the skill that they're lacking? And maybe they need to be taught. That's usually what behaviors are around. And often people will say things about, oh, little Susie just wants attention. Well, let's change that thinking to be, no, more than likely she's trying to make a connection through her behavior. Something is not right. They're trying to communicate with us. They're trying to connect with us. Rather than, oh, they just want attention. Yeah, they do, but it's because they want to connect with you. And sometimes we know kids will do things just to do them because they don't know how to express themselves. So that's where all those other skills come into play with paying attention and that sense of self-regulation and then being able to communicate that, whether verbally or through pictures or sign language or drawings or writing, whatever, dance, movement, whatever it is that they've learned to use, and ultimately communicating what it is they need, and us supporting that in helping to teach them how to self-regulate and how to communicate using their words or whatever their words may look like.
Yes, and whatever their words might look like is the thing that I was thinking about here as you were talking, and how sort of the long-term engagement of parents and carers with the kids is what allows for the kind of communication that we're talking about, because it's both sides.
Yes,
it seems to me, It is not only co-regulating, it's co-conversing, communicating. Sometimes we've got to bring, as parents or carers, we've got to bring something to the party there. We can't wait for it to come to us. And I think that's kind of the piece that the parents have that the schools have, that the schools don't have so much, is they don't have the kid all the time.
Right.
And for that long developmental time as well. But the parents are party to that, and the parents are completely intimate with the child if they're paying attention and co-regulating and doing all those things all the way along.
Right. And then joining forces with the teachers, the schools. As the parents, the carers, and sharing what they know of their child, especially those with different abilities. If they do have an IEP or a 504 service agreement, that's a part of the team, the village that it takes to raise a
Yeah.
child, and sharing those different points of view on the youth so that you can be focusing on the strengths as well as the areas that they need support in. But we definitely want to keep in mind their strengths, their interests, their preferences as we're building their skills. We want to use their strengths to build the areas that are not as strong.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So that
so,
means being flexible.
yeah.
As a parent, you're going to have to, yeah, and the schools too, the teachers, you've got to learn how to be flexible, by knowing your child
Yeah.
and being able to adapt and adjust. And that too is going to be modeling. If you're able to show, flexibility with working with your youth, then that's going to show them it's okay to be flexible. It's okay to change how we do things, change up our strategies, because what's going to work right for you in that moment could be different than tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I want to come back again to what the parents and carers get out of this. So, sort of the personal benefits to being involved with these skills in a very conscious way. As I say, we all have them, but to really bring them to the fore in our
Mm-hmm.
lives and in our relationships with our kids. That when we as parents or carers can do that self-regulation piece, that then, our regulation flows outwards.
Yeah.
As I said at the beginning, it's contagious in a way
Mm-hmm.
to the kids, and so the atmosphere in the family is
Mm-hmm.
very different. And so I want to pause for a moment. I want to punctuate this, as a friend of mine says. I want to punctuate the fact that in a family where there are kids with differences, there are also kids who are, watching, who
Mm-hmm.
are like me in my family with a sibling on either side of me. The siblings need that regulation too, and they really rely on the parents' self-regulation. And I'm not sure that everybody is always thinking about that person. I think sometimes
Right.
that person is just assumed, oh, they can regulate themselves. They're
Yeah.
good. They're good. They got it. And guess what? We don't got it all the time.
Yeah.
I can tell you. So to know that person may be, assuming a lot of responsibility for themselves that maybe they don't want to assume, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe they would prefer to have their back rubbed sometimes,
Right.
when they're feeling off. So the parent role here of being the one who's regulated, and or the carer of being the
Mm-hmm.
one who's regulated is really important for everyone and sort of sets the tone. But guess what? When you're doing that, it comes right back to you, right?
Yes.
Because you're changing how it is in the room in that moment.
It does. The tone.
While you are present, the tone
Mm-hmm.
changes. And so everybody can move on and have a better time. And I think that's what we all want for our kids, our families. However we're put together.
And that sense of
Together.
calm together,
Yeah.
being together in it as a family, because I agree with there are siblings that are considered neurotypical, and parents are just so overwhelmed with their youth with different abilities that they make assumptions because they're drained, they're exhausted from everything
Mm-hmm.
else. And but by checking in with themselves as an adult, they can just, okay, how am I doing? And then am I noticing what the siblings are manifesting
Yeah.
at that same moment, and being able to use that opportunity to also support them through practicing the self-regulation and the noticing what's going on in the bodies and the sensations. And that 1 minute of check-in, like you did earlier, that can just totally change the tone of a situation in a heartbeat.
Yeah. So I think that we've talked about the stuff that I wanted to talk about, and now, Sandy, I'd like to give you a chance to talk about the stuff that you'd like to talk about. If there are things that you've been thinking about through this, 40 minutes that we've spent together, 50 minutes that we've spent together. Pardon me. Yeah. So.
Sure. Yeah, I want to reiterate that kids with different abilities are just kids. We all have our different abilities. We all have our variabilities. We all have different learning profiles and life profiles, and every one of us is unique. And, in our society, in our world, we tend to need labels to get kids help. They need to be labeled with having autism or ADHD or intellectual disability, whatever it may be, because that's how they get their supports in school. It's just part of society, but they are all more than just their disability. And I always explain when I'm doing trainings and with educators and reminding them that we're all like a pie, and it's just a little sliver of the pie that is the disability part. There is so much more to the whole child, and remembering that the child is a whole child, and they probably understand more than a lot of people assume. They understand, they feel it, it just early in my career, I realized that when I was working with teenagers who were mostly nonverbal and significant cognitive disabilities, but they could feel the tension, and then their behaviors would rise. And so keeping in mind that they're whole children, their disability is not what's defining them. It's just a piece of who they are. And we need to help them with accepting that and having a successful life through it. And part of our job is that we're doing this together as a family or with carers, and preparing the children as much as possible for whatever experiences, knowing them, as you were saying earlier, knowing them as well as you do as a parent or a carer, you can help with preparing the youth for something that might be a potential trigger and talking them through it in advance. Because what we want to be doing is reducing or eliminating those barriers that potentially are going to get in the way of a child being successful. And we can't see the child as being the barrier. You often will hear, well, he can't do that because he can only read at a second grade level and he's 15. No, what is it about our environment, the situation, the context that we, as the carers and the parents, what can we do to reduce or eliminate that barrier to allow them to be successful? We want to be providing them access to opportunities, just like any neurotypical non-disabled child. And because they deserve it as well, they're human beings first and foremost. We have to keep that in mind. They're part of our society, our communities, and we need to be celebrating every single child that we have in our families, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, in our nation.
Yeah. Sandy, thank you.
I could keep going.
I am sure you could. I'm sure we could talk for another hour, and maybe we will sometime.
Would love to do it. Yes.
So thank you so much. This has been really deep, really wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Usually I say something like, this has been a blast because it's been fun. It has been fun, but on a different level. And so I just want to say that this has been wonderful. And I look forward to, engaging with you again and talking more.
Absolutely.
About this.
And if anybody out there wants to be in touch with me, just look me up on the PaTTAN website.
There you
just
go.
Google PaTTAN.
Okay. Well,
happy to help.
All right. Well, thank you. So the ending of these is very abrupt. just go off. So thanks again.
Thank you.